Hello everyone! Today we will guide you through an extraordinary yet perilous conflict with one of the most catastrophic invasive creatures on Earth, harming not just natural habitats, but agricultural lands as well. This tale chronicles a farmer's struggle for existence against a deceptively innocent yet hazardous intruder, the feral pig. Come with us as we delve into this adventure. This previous autumn, we observed an assault of wild hogs in a corn plantation in Texas. What stands out particularly is their enormous destructive capability and how they generate chaos like never witnessed before. Their snouts can detect nourishment and abundant farmlands. They penetrate these fields alongside their offspring to consume the produce that cultivators prepare for collection. We will uncover how negligence during the cultivation procedure can result in massive losses for growers when feral swine trample or devour crops and kernels before they sprout. It becomes quite apparent to observe their enormous tracks on recently sown areas. They also show no restraint regarding devastating maize fields, instead choosing alternative sustenance. At this moment, we will examine the significance of corn for wild pigs, because, for them, maize represents an essential component of their daily diet, particularly in corn plantations. This supplies the optimal nutrients and vitality for feral hogs. Corn plantations serve as their preferred hiding spots and feeding grounds. They approach and ravage the cornfield from the center, rather than the perimeter. In America, wild swine inflict up to $2.5 billion in destruction annually. The administration is intensifying measures to battle them, especially throughout the Texas harvest season. The population of feral pigs continues growing, and the corn plantations are deteriorating significantly. This places numerous farmers in challenging circumstances. Pursuing wild boar in agricultural areas represents an enjoyable pastime and is frequently undertaken by individuals who appreciate recreational hunting. However, we must remember to follow legal requirements during this procedure. Hunters typically approach stealthily while wild boars are occupied, capitalizing on opportunities and targeting them with accuracy. Feral swine in America have ravaged numerous corn plantations. They have placed surrounding communities under strain. As you cycle through the cornfield, you might encounter one or two wild boars running freely, spreading havoc and trampling the cultivator's land. Solutions such as barriers and snares have been deployed but haven't proven highly successful, as pigs frequently demolish crops surrounding them, particularly during harvest time. But what about the more extensive cornfields? Boars have generated substantial losses for corn cultivators here when they assault large corn areas unexpectedly and inflict harm to the terrain or developing corn plantations, potentially consuming up to 50 acres. To prevent wild boars from devastating cornfields during nighttime, farmers organize expeditions in their own corn plantations at dusk. To accomplish this, they must possess many years of hunting expertise and extremely precise vision, because you cannot escape rapidly from a frightening creature like them.
Where'd it go?
They remain very active during darkness, traveling in groups, and each group contains approximately 10 to 20 wild boars. Consequently, it must be extremely swift and precise so that no wild boar escapes. On a broader scale, feral swine not only devastate cornfields, but can also pollute water supplies and endanger humans, domestic animals, and other wildlife. They assault and consume anything they encounter, including carcasses of other creatures. They invade urban areas, ransack garbage containers, and contaminate the surroundings. They roam freely on streets, frightening people and preventing vehicle circulation. The battle against wild boar continues, and we must discover solutions to safeguard cornfields and natural systems. When wild boars enter a field in herds, they don't just eat the corn, they destroy everything in their path. They take just one bite from each ear of corn, then move on. With their powerful snouts, they tear through the soil, snapping stalks and uprooting crops, as if they were plowing the field themselves. If they simply stayed in one area and ate what they needed, the damage might be manageable. But no, they plow through 50,000 acres like a bulldozer, turning farmland into a wasteland. And if we don't act now, they'll keep coming, every day, leaving nothing behind. They even dig up and eat freshly planted corn seeds before they have a chance to grow. The threat is real, the damage is massive, and the time to defend our fields is now.
Make some Boar up there.
You now possess better comprehension of the danger and efforts of American farmers to defend corn plantations from advancing feral hogs. Let us unite and take measures to preserve the environment and this crucial food supply. There exist many other invasive creatures that endanger the American ecosystem and agriculture. How shall we confront them? Let's proceed to another region where the natural terrain is being invaded, in addition to the adverse effects caused by the 287 million feral rabbits in Australia. In recent decades, Australia's natural and agricultural terrain has also been dramatically transformed by the influence of other invasive creatures, including wild goats, feral swine, wild camels, and the European red fox. Most invasive creatures were introduced to Australia between the 17th and 18th centuries by European explorers and colonists. During that period, these animals were brought to Australia for hunting recreation and providing dairy or meat. Animals that fled into the wilderness have multiplied and established populations of invasive species in Australia. Similar to how invasive species are managed in America, the Australian government permits people to hunt certain invasive creatures in large quantities. Additionally, economically valuable invasive species are gathered and marketed by farmers to recover lost production expenses. These were the initial goats introduced to Australia by British workers and miners in the 17th century. They brought them as companions and sustenance. But after many years, the goats escaped or were released into the wilderness, establishing a wild goat population. Currently, there are approximately 2.3 million feral goats residing in Australia, distributed mainly in semi-arid or mountainous regions such as Western New South Wales, South Australia, Western Australia, and Queensland. Like the white-tailed deer in America. White-tailed deer cause over $500 million in damage to U.S. agriculture every year. Yes, the scale of this loss is much greater than many realize. These animals especially target corn, soybeans, fruits, and vegetables. They quietly enter fields at night, moving in herds and feeding on the most valuable parts of the crops. By morning, farmers are left with trampled plants and destroyed harvests. The wild goat in Australia can appear quite adorable. However, the population exceeding 2 million wild goats causes tremendous damage to Australia's agriculture and environment in states such as Victoria and New South Wales. Wild goat herds in Western Australia cause considerable environmental harm due to competition for water, sustenance, and shelter with native wildlife and livestock. Furthermore, feral goats negatively impact Australian agriculture by overgrazing grasslands, damaging crops, and reducing farmers' profits. It is estimated that feral goats cost the Australian agricultural sector approximately $25 million annually, regardless of their environmental impact or grassland deterioration. Goats are also considered the primary cause of foot and mouth disease in cattle in Australia today. The commercial collection of wild goats is valued at around $29 million, and many Australian herders regard capturing and selling wild goats as a vital aspect of their enterprise. This also assists them in minimizing the economic harm caused by wild goats. Australia frequently employs horses and helicopters to gather hundreds of wild goats before selling to goat meat processing facilities. The average male wild goat in Australia typically weighs around 132 pounds, while an adult female goat weighs approximately 97 pounds. The average price farmers receive for selling a wild goat is about $13.70. Additionally, hunting and trapping are utilized to manage wild goat populations in Australia. Wild goat populations in Australia are eliminated through various methods. If left unchecked, the wild goat population in this country would double every 1.5 years. Besides feral goats, wild camels also pose a problem for Australia's natural and agricultural landscape. It is estimated that by 2022, there will be around 1.3 million feral camels living in Australia, present in approximately 53% of Australia's grassland ecosystems. This includes most arid regions of Western Australia, South Australia, and the Northern Territory, as well as portions of Queensland. In the 1840s, the first camels were introduced to Australia by the British to assist in exploring remote and inhospitable parts of the continent. Until 1907, the number of camels in Australia was only about 21,000. At this point, they weren't considered problematic. However, with the arrival of motorized transportation in the 1920s, camel travel was gradually discontinued, and consequently, camels were released into the wild. Although camels cannot reproduce as rapidly as rabbits, they are well adapted to distant lands and lack natural predators. As a result, the number of wild camels in Australia has increased consistently. It is estimated that in the early 2000s, the population of wild camels in Australia peaked at around 3.1 million. However, when control measures such as hunting, traps, and others were implemented, the numbers of these animals were reduced by more than half. Feral camels create particular problems for people residing in areas where they are most prevalent. They can destroy barriers and quickly and completely devastate vegetation areas by trampling and consuming it. They can also drain small water reservoirs in arid regions. Additionally, wild camels become hostile toward sheep and cattle, sometimes refusing to allow them to feed or drink. It is estimated that the economic damage caused by wild camels in Australia is around $17 million per year. Of course, this reported figure is likely much lower than reality. When hunting wild camels across mainland Australia, currently the most popular approach is aerial hunting by helicopter. they gather wild camels together and then eliminate them. Most state governments and the national government allow people to hunt wild camels in unlimited numbers. It is estimated that every year, around 103,000 wild camels are captured for meat in Australia. Furthermore, between 9,000 and 13,000 wild camels perish annually due to old age or other issues such as food scarcity or harsh climate. To this day, millions of wild goats and feral camels remain a problem for Australian governments and farmers attempting to control populations through methods such as hunting or sterilization. This represents the best and most humane approach to maintain their numbers while protecting the interests of both local communities, farmers, and Australia's native species. So, you already understand much about these wild animals, correct? If you enjoyed the video, please check out our next video. Farewell, and see you in the next video.